My name is Apraxia. I am a speech language pathologist. I'm the director of FutuReady Pediatric Intervention Services. I have an expertise with working with children with autism spectrum disorder, particularly in family-centered and child-centered approaches and interventions like the Hanen program and the DIR Floortime model. And today we're going to talk about something really, really interesting and fun because it's something which we do with our kids every day. So we're going to be talking about how important play is and how we can use that as a tool to foster interaction in our kids with autism. So let's start about talking about what's play. So play is the driving force for learning. Play is something which roots our social and emotional well-being. It's it's something which contributes to our linguistic, motor, and cognitive intellectual growth. And for me, play is more like a happy state. It's a happy state where I think the child is free, the child is free to explore different things. The child is free from getting judged by anybody, which is something probably we've all experienced in our own childhoods. Uh, we hold on to our own inhibitions. So play allows us to show that side of ourselves which we generally hold on to because we get very conscious. And the reason why it's important, and I'm going to be focusing a lot about on play, is because it helps us re-engage with our kids and really experience what that emotional bonding is. And most importantly, play marks the foundation of sharing a warm and nurturing relationship with our kids. So I'd like to really share about something which I learned in my DIR training. My instructor, Jackie Bartle, has always been telling us, and in fact, she has podcasts available online where she talks about us being human beings and not human doings. Okay, so there's a difference when we are trying to just share a moment with our kids rather than thinking, oh my God, what do I have to do to make my child get successful? So in a DIR model, we try to build uh, relationships in such a way that it allows our kids to expand that relationship with other people, which probably is one of the most crucial highlights of children with autism, that they're not able to socially interact. Now, maybe for many of you, it might be a very difficult thing to understand and very big hurdle to overcome, because when we talk of being, many people feel that you're not doing any work. Why aren't you doing anything? Why aren't you achieving goals? Why aren't you working on your skills? That's because this is how we've been trained. We have been told to, okay, you need to do this, you did do this, do that. And when we see kids, parents of children with autism especially, they are anxious, they are worked out, they are stressed for their kids. And most importantly, when they get their first diagnosis done for their toddlers, they're being given a huge list of things to be done, right from filling out forms and checklists and going to a number of therapies and meeting professionals. That's because we want our kids to get better. And during all these process, we really forget about what our child experiences or what does my child need at that moment of time. So when we are talking of just being with the child, we are talking of staying in that moment. We are talking of being present, being aware. We're talking of observing what our child is doing and just be. It's okay not to really work on your goals. Okay, it's fine not to work on anything, or just play with your kid. Just let it be, right? So why that is important is because uh, this is going to help your child showcase what he or she learns, rather than when we try to qualitatively measure our kids and our success by maybe the knowledge of numbers or rhymes or alphabets or shapes and those kind of things. Now, when we do flow time by just being with the kid, we can teach all of that to our kids, and most importantly we can teach them how to use it appropriately, how to use it relevantly, we teach our kids how to interact, not because we want them to interact. We teach them how to interact because it is fun and they want to do it. Okay, so that's the difference when we think of just being with a child versus getting things done. Yeah. So now, whenever I meet parents, I've met a couple of parents who've told me that, hey, I need my child to engage with me, or I need my child to play with me, or I need my child to share that relationship that I am expecting from him. Now, what we might want to be very clear about is that instead of us expecting the child to join our world, we really need to go down to their levels and join them. All right. So we see all sorts of concerns, like the child only likes to play alone, or the child has very strange choices of playing, like for example jumping or saying repetitive lines from movies or advertisements, obsessively talking about something which is a strong interest, or maybe watching spinning objects, and so on and so forth. And parents also say that their child does not know how to play properly. Now, properly is a norm that we have developed by looking at other typically developing kids. And what this leads to is that the child learns to get away from you. The child learns to escape from situations simply because he's getting very frustrated that parents are not able to understand what the child needs. Okay, so that's exactly when parents might think that, okay, why am I not able to intrude into that activity, intrude into that game? And many kids have a habit of repeating lots of dialogues, or lots of lines that they've heard in past, and just keeping themselves calm using that. Okay, so we really need to go down and think of why it is happening, rather than what can we do to fix all of these. Okay, so let's be very clear when we talk of kids with autism, that kids with autism spectrum disorders do not need fixing. We are not here to fix them. We are here to acknowledge them. We are here to understand what they are going through, and we are here to change the surrounding, change ourselves based on what the requirement of that child is. And believe me, when you think of kids this way, it is going to bring down your stress levels. And once your stress levels are regulated, obviously the child is also happy. Okay, and before we can jump on to how to build on interaction and how to build on engagement with the child, this is something really crucial aspect which most of the times people don't understand, and many SLPs, people in my profession, also do not know how to go about this, because this is a very new concept, and the right people to help you out with this are occupational therapists. And I've been very lucky enough to have one of the very best occupational therapists with me. and we're going to know about what makes us different. Okay, so every child is born with this unique biology, unique differences, something that makes each of us different than each other in terms of how we take in information from the world and how we react to it. Okay. Um, Now we're going to be talking about this in depth. Now we start off with something called auditory processing. Now auditory processing is taking in what we hear, okay, understanding and making sense of what somebody is telling us. Okay, so it's basically hearing information, decoding that information based on sounds or words, and then really making sense of it. That's something which is directly linked to your language development. Okay, um, this is something which is commonly found as a concern in kids with autism. Few kids may have problems in terms of taking in information. Few kids may have problems in terms of expressing that information, obviously because they've not made sense of it. And there are few kids who have problems with both. Now, typically, when you see kids who have auditory processing issues, will will appear to not follow instructions. Okay, will appear very slow, confused because they can't make sense of what you're talking to them, right? And what happens is when this keeps on repeating again and again, at one point the child really gets frustrated, and then the whole dysregulation occurs, right? So what happens when we are hearing information, we are making sense of what we've understood. The next thing that we're going to do is react to it or plan an action. So when we plan an action based on what information we've taken in is something called motor planning and sequencing. Okay, so the ability to plan or execute an action after an information has been fed. So that's what we're going to be talking about. Now, motor planning and sequencing is something which starts right the time we are babies. So, for example, there's a baby and his mom calls out his name, and the immediate reaction is just to look and turn and finding a face, right? Now, as kids grow up, this motor planning and sequencing elaborates, it expands. Now, it could just be something like maybe the child wants to get something from the fridge. So the child goes to the father and reaches out to him, pulls him, takes him towards the refrigerator, and then asks for what she wants. All right. So you see how motor planning and sequencing develops, it expands, right? So it consists of complex actions that grow. Um, One of the very crucial aspects of motor planning and sequencing is that kids with ASD are not quite able to imitate motor skills or verbal skills. All right. So whenever as an SLP, I say let's say pa pa pa, and the child goes like ka ka ka. All right. It's not that the child doesn't want to say. We have to understand that there's something in him stopping him from doing that. All right. And what as parents we don't understand is that he's not doing it on purpose. All right. So we really need to get down to the basics and understand that okay, there's something which is not allowing him to do that action or to play that game. One of the very crucial features that you will see with kids who have motor planning issues is that their games or their way of play is very restricted. Okay, um, it could be maybe sliding down and then getting back and then sliding again and then getting back. But if you introduce a new element, the child does not know how to plan an action for it. All right. Now, what happens is kids who are on the spectrum, we need to really make sure that we are simplifying tasks for them rather than challenging them in terms of, hey, you can do it, it is easy. It is not easy. The child is not able to do it. It means that it is challenging. All right. So the next skill that we move on to is visual spatial processing. Now, just like how auditory processing is all about taking in information we hear and processing, making sense out of it, visuospatial processing is all about taking information we see and then trying to make sense out of it. So it is about how we see objects in relation to us, right? So when we look at kids who have issues with visual spatial processing, will very frequently try to knock over things. They are very clumsy, very frequently fall down because they are not able to process the environment by sight, which we normally are able to do. Now, typically, these kids might not be able to follow things like obstacle courses. Okay, now this is a very fun activity which we plan out in occupational therapy sessions when the OTs are working on these skills. And we then see how difficult it is for kids to be able to cope up. Right? So that's about visual spatial processing. The next thing we're going to talk about is sensory modulation or regulation. Now, there have been wonderful speakers who've already spoken about sensory development and what sensory integration is. I'm not going to be going in depth with it because that is not my area to talk about. But let me just show you uh, how it plays a role in terms of causing dysregulation, in terms of getting kids detached from us if we don't take care of these things. So when we talk of sensory processing, there are kids who react in an overreactive manner. Okay, which means that a slight stimulation is enough for them to have a breakdown. Okay, for example, if you're just trying to slightly feather touch a child, maybe tickle him, for us it's a very pleasurable sensation, but for a child who is overreactive, it might feel like you're rubbing a scratch. Now that's really crazy, right? So then what happens is when you also see kids who have issues with movements. If they are overreactive, they will not move around too much. They'll be scared of getting onto the trampoline. They'll be scared of sitting on the swings. They'll be scared of maybe getting up and down from the stairs. For kids who are oversensitive to sounds, will will probably shut their ears and run around if they normally hear a stop, because what seems to us as normal loudness would possibly sound like you're screeching into their ears, right? So that gets them dysregulated very easily. So the same thing goes with sight, taste, and proprioception. So when kids who are overreactive to visual stimulation will prefer dim lit rooms. They get very dysregulated in sunlight or in bright lights, too many colors around. All right. When we talk about the aspect of taste, kids who are oversensitive to taste will prefer bland food. They do not like heightened tastes. They do not like different textures. All right. And they might maybe gag onto food, like whatever is offered. When kids, we're talking about kids who are hyperreactive, overreactive. Now, we have kids who also are underreactive. So who are the kids who are underreactive will regularly run around everywhere. They want that sensory input to keep themselves calm, right? So you often see for people who are proprioceptive seeking will go on to cozy spaces. They like to have pillows on top of them getting squeezed on. Uh, then we have vestibular movements where underreactive kids will go running around the trampoline. At home, they're jumping on the couch. They're doing all sorts of things which we call as unsafe. Okay. Uh, I'm not going to get on to the depth of it because we are running short of time. All right. So now what happens is we need to understand whenever kids get dysregulated, what we see on the outside is an outburst. It's a behavior that we see in terms of crying, banging their heads, trying to hit others. Now, we need to know that there's something which is causing these behaviors. And most importantly, things that kids are doing by running around or shutting their ears or rocking constantly or spinning constantly, these are called coping strategies. There are many people who term these as behaviors. And what happens is they try to eliminate these coping strategies, or what they call as behaviors. So when you're trying to eliminate coping strategies which kids are using to keep themselves calm and regulated, we are actually increasing anxiety. We are actually increasing stress and fear, right? And when we're doing that, kids obviously throw up a tantrum, and then we label kids as being non-compliant or increasingly manipulative, or saying things like, oh, I know he knows everything, but he's just not doing it, or he just does not want to do it. Okay, now we need to really understand that these are strategies which are keeping them calm. So please allow them to use these coping strategies, which we also call stimming, because that is the food for their brains that is going to keep them well regulated, keep them alert, keep them focused. And this is what we need for any sort of learning, right? And when we're not doing that, eventually the child reaches the state of fight or flight. Okay, so the child reaches the state of panic, and what that's where you can't do anything about it. And it just gets worse. So we need to know that when we talk of kids with autism, it's all about acknowledging their feelings. It's about respecting what they feel and how they want to keep themselves calm. Okay. Now, this is a very important thing I thought I should share with you about how we can cause dysregulation. Now, I'm pretty sure all of us as parents, as therapists, as caregivers have sometime experienced this thing where we have been the cause of the child starting to cry and dysregulate. So what happens is often when we are training kids, we we aim at building patience, we aim at building endurance. And what happens is that makes it even worse. So for example, which commonly we do all the time is, asking the parents to the children to stay for 5 minutes. Do that activity for 5 minutes, just 5 minutes, and it's done. Okay, now 5 minutes might seem as 5 hours for the child, so that is something which we really need to understand, and that's it. That gets him going. That's enough for him to have a total meltdown or a breakdown. Okay, so instead of posing a demand on that child that no, you have to do this, or I'm going to give you 2 minutes more and you have to finish this job. We have to think of how we can help our kids to cope up with stress, how we can help our kids to to regulate themselves, or we can help them, in terms of respecting their sensory needs. So there's a lot of environmental modification you can do. For example, if a child is hypersensitive to sounds, you can give them maybe noise dampening headphones. If you think the child is hypersensitive to light, you can maybe use a dim lit room. Okay, not too many colors around, not too many pictures around that might distract him too much. Now there are often kids who have a habit of repetitive talking, right? So for a child who's repeatedly asking you a question like, go to the park, go to the park, and the parent is really going crazy telling the child, like, okay, we are going to the park at 6 o'clock in the evening, right? But the child still wants that assurance and keeps going on and on and on. So instead of us acting upon that situation in a very stressful manner and stressing out the child, we can always use visual supports. Maybe, putting a sticky note, writing down that, okay, we're going to go at 6 o'clock. And maybe putting it onto the fridge or whatever is a convenient place for the child to look at. So what happens is you are not only helping the child to be calm, you are giving that child a surety of what's going to happen, and you are respecting the child's intentions, right? So when we are acknowledging the child's concerns, it is going to really keep them calm. And something which I've always seen parents do when I meet them is that I think we all have had that experience where we've given toys to our kids, like, okay, now, why don't you just take this and play with it? And we don't know if the child wants it. We don't know if the child likes it. We don't know if that toy is capable of dysregulating the child. So what that leads to is loss of trust, and which is a very huge hurdle when we want to really connect with our kids, when we want to really share a relationship with our kids, right? So trust is the foundation for a healthy relationship, right? So when you are very frequently exposing your child to a situation which is a challenge, when you're posing a lot of demands on your kids, what eventually happens is the child learns to stay away from you. The child learns to uh, predict that, oh my God, my mom's coming and she has something in her hand and I don't want to be with her. And the child runs away. So escaping and avoiding situations is an outcome of the loss of trust that happens due to anxiety. So we really need to understand that we are validating the child's feelings, and especially the child's feeling of regulation. What is it that the child needs? How is it that I can help my child be calm and be happy? Okay. Now, I'm just going to give you a gist of what I learned in the DIR training. This is something which you can find in books, even online on their website. We talk of something called the developmental ladder. Okay. Now, the developmental ladder is nothing but a developmental hierarchy of social and emotional skills. What is it that we need to achieve in order to be successful and independent thinkers as independent human beings? Okay? So the first thing that you're going to need is regulation. Regulation is something that we've just spoken. It's about how alert you are. It's about how calm you are. It's about how focused you are. Now, for our little kiddos with ASD, we really need to think of the factors, the sensory factors, which are going to help the child be regulated and be open to accepting information from us. Okay. So now when that happens, you start engaging with your child. All right. Now, engaging is again nothing but being with your kid. Being with your kid and letting the kid observe you. Okay. So it's something which Dr. Greenspan, the founder of DIR, um, he talks about having the gleam in the eye, the excitement in the eye, that eagerness to having you in their world. That is something called engagement. I have a very nice example. Suppose if you have a little baby and you go and tickle him, what happens? He reacts by smiling. And what does that tell you? Telling you that, hey, I like that. Like, do that again. Can you do that one more time? And what happens is you're establishing such beautiful connection with your child, and you're engaging with him, uh, which gets your two-way purposeful communication going. So back and forth interaction of what you are feeling. Okay, we are not there at a word level or verbal level yet. We are respecting the child, even if we are using gestures. So we have to remember that using gestures is a precursor to speech. Kids need to understand what the how the world is, and even if they are expressing what they feel through gestures, it's okay. All right. So when we have the two-way purposeful communication going on, we're building up on something called circles of communication, which we call it in our DIR language. All right. So now when kids grow up a little, and the similar example I do, that the child wants something, maybe a jar of cookies. So the child comes to you, or maybe the child first tries to reach it by himself and doesn't happen, doesn't work out. So the child is forced to come to you and drag you by the hand and take you and show you, point out that, hey, I want that jar of cookies, right? So what's happening? You have created a social problem over there that, okay, we have a problem and we have to solve it. Now, what that done is that given the child an opportunity to interact with you, to communicate with you, to send you an intentional message. So, what the child is trying to do right now is tell you gesturally that, hey, I want that, right? So, that's about shared social problem or complex gestures. Now, when we talk of complex gestures, we also need to remember that as we are learning to problem solve at level 4, we are also working on our motor planning and sequencing, because it's about thinking, uh, what do I have to do to get what I want? So if I want a jar of cookies, I have to plan out a sequence of motor action. So there we are working on our expression, gestural expression, and we are working on our motor planning. So that's what we call working on our gestural vocabulary, right? Now, as kids grow up, they start to symbolize the world. They start to use a lot of pretend play. They start to imagine. They start to create a lot of ideas, right? So now this is where kids start to really try to use language, so when we're creating ideas, we are actually trying to build up on our higher level skills of logical thinking, or abstract thinking, or being able to negotiate or reason out problems. And these are the skills that you will need for your child in his academic life. So now you see how these things are interlinked, and they are going to from one level to the other level. Now we need to look at where our child is. Now it can't happen that my child can only be at level 3 or level 4, based on situations, based on scenarios. All of us are going to go up and down the developmental ladder. Okay, so this was about the DIR model. Okay, and now let's move on to play. So now we've spent enough time talking about how it is important to engage with our child, and what is the foundation of getting that connection, or building up that relationship with our child. Now we're going to talk about play. Now, we develop communication skills, and any sort of skill for that matter, while we are having fun. So that's because we are very open to learning when we are in our happy state, when we are uh, really calm, we are attentive, and we are focused. Okay. Now we're going to talk about tickles again. So when you go and tickle your baby, what does the child do? What does he do to you? Okay. Maybe the child might look at you. Maybe the child might smile. The child might just laugh and giggle. Or the child might take your hand and put it on his tummy again, telling you that, hey, let's do that one more time, or let's just keep this going. So you're building up on the circles of communication, on the back and forth interaction. And when you're doing that repeatedly, you are working on something called predictability. Now, predictability is something which all our little kiddos with autism need. They need to know what's coming next. They need to be able to predict their routines. They need to be able to predict activities because that's what keeps them calm. Kids with ASD do not like uncertainties, and that is one of the things that leads to dysregulation, right? So when we have a predictable structure built in a game, that makes the foundation for us to work on our communication skills. So when we talk of people play, we have people games and we have people toys. Now we're going to talk about both of these in detail. Now people games are the type of games or activities where it is just you and your child involved, right? So it could be just lifting him up and putting him down, or maybe running and chasing, or tickles, or hide and seek, or singing some songs together. So what helps the child get engaged with you or connect with you is that the child wants to see you do something, right? So um, whatever that you do to him when you're tickling him really is fun. Or when you're singing songs together, maybe that's his favorite song, and you sing part of the song and the child tends to complete it. That's because the child wants to see what's happening, and that gets the back and forth interaction going, right? And we also have to remember whenever we are choosing these people games, we consider the child's sensory preferences, because the sensory preferences are going to make them look forward to that game again. So it keeps them motivated. Whereas if I pick a child who's hypersensitive to movements and I swing him around, he's only going to land up crying. And we don't want that. What eventually would happen is he's going to look at me and get scared, right? And I don't want that to happen. So always consider your child's sensory preferences, right? And what that does is it gives us it gives us an opportunity to have that space to interact, right? So maybe what you could do is change your people games slowly and see how the child reacts to it. Do something fun. So always incorporate things that the child likes to, right? Then we have people toys. People toys are toys which a child cannot operate on his own. The child is going to need your help. Now, what happens when you are using toys which probably a child can play on his own? The child is not even going to care about you. The child is not focused on you in the first place. Why? Because he has built his world within that zone of his favorite toys. Now the reason people toys work out the best is again because the child needs you to do something or to make the toy work, right? And again, these toys will also appeal to the child's sensory preferences. So for example, now when we're talking, let's talk of bubbles. So a child might maybe like to watch you blow the bubble and see the bubble come out of the bubble wand and flow out through the air. Or the child might maybe like to pop the bubbles and see how it feels. All right. So based on the sensory preferences, you have to really see what the child likes in that activity or in that game, right? And again, when you're doing this repeatedly and the child is really enjoying what you do, you're creating a reason for them to send you a message. So this builds up that foundation for you to work on communication skills, right? Then we are going to talk about toy play. Now, there's concrete research that's been done since years that tells us that play skills are directly linked to language development. Okay, so as the child learns to play from simple to complex and uses toys in more sophisticated manner, the language develops the same way, right? So you might just maybe start um, just naming toys or naming something that the child is doing. Later on, you are going to add in more words, right? So that's how we work from using just maybe 1 to 2 words, labeling words, to moving on to a phrase level or a sentence level, right? So what happens is the child learns how to shift attention, the child learns how to send messages, the child learns to imagine, the child learns to solve problems, okay, as the play develops, as the toy play develops, and this is how even cognitively the child is growing, right? So now I want all of you to think of what are the kind of toys your child likes to play with. Okay, so if you actually notice, everything that the child likes is going to incorporate his or her sensory preference. Okay, now there might be toys which are very easy to play with, and there might be toys which are really difficult to play, and the child doesn't prefer playing with those toys at all. No matter how much you go buy toys from families and offer to the child, and the child is just going to be like, nah, I'm not going to play with it. So we have different kinds of toys that we talk about. So when we look at toys, we need to categorize them into different kinds. So for example, we have cause and effect toys. Cause and effect toys are really, really fun, and that's something which catches the child's attention very easily. It's because you are doing something to make something really fun happen. So you press a button and a toy pops out. Okay, you press a button and the car goes down the ramp. So there's something happening which is causing that toy to behave in some way, right? So you have the pop-up books, you have these pop-up toys, which can come into the category of cause and effect toys. Then you have something called completion toys. Now, completion toys will incorporate your puzzles, will incorporate your shape sorters, okay? And these kind of toys have a built-in end, okay? Which means that, okay, once the puzzle is done, my game is over, okay? Now, I don't have anything else to do. So that's how they have a built-in end. Now, when we talk of construction toys are something where you have to maybe put pieces together or join things together to make something new. Okay, so this is something which might be a little tricky for kids with autism. It's because there is lack of predictability in construction. Okay, so for example, if I'm working with Lego blocks, I can maybe build a car. I can maybe build a building out of it. Okay, so for me, it's an easy job. For a typical child, it could be an easy job. But when we look at kids with autism, since they like to stick to predictability, it might really be difficult for them. Then we have creative toys. Now, creative toys will incorporate your Play-Doh, will incorporate maybe playing with sand, building castles, when you are actually using different things to build build upon your creative idea. Okay, um, this is also a little difficult for kids with ASD because again, they don't know what to do. There's lack of predictability. Okay. Then we have something called pretend play toys, where you maybe working with a kitchen set or a doctor set, all right, when you are simulating a situation, you're pretending to play with something which symbolizes a real thing, right? And then we have games with rules. Okay, like my favorite one would be Hungry Hippos. So games with rules are very fun to have interaction with a lot of people because um, they can see each other, they can see what the other person is doing. The child learns to take turns, the child learns to wait, or the child can even predict what's going to happen next. Okay, so the games with rules of pretend play are going to start building up on the social interaction, right? So you might want to think of what kind of toys that you categorize the ones that your kids play with, right? The next thing that we would want to talk about is stages of toy play. uh, Now, each of our kids have a different way of playing. So maybe your child likes to put things in the mouth regularly. The child likes to touch everything they see. The child likes to explore what the toy is by seeing how it feels, right? So that's something which is exploratory play, which we typically see in babies as they grow up. So this is again a developmental sequence of how play occurs. So then once the child has explored the world, the toys around him, the child will eventually learn to how to use it as they are intended to be used. Okay, like for example, you have a toy spoon and you're, trying to feed yourself or feed somebody or the teddy bear. You're actually using the spoon for its purpose. So that's functional play. Okay, now knocking over balls or playing with a bat and ball, using crayons for that matter. These are all functional plays because you are using these objects or toys for their designated purpose, right? And then we move on to pretend play. So as kids learn to use things functionally, they move on to pretending situations, right? So when we're talking of early pretend play, the kids are going to use real life objects. For example, having the toy set, or sorry, the fruit set with a knife and different kind of fruits and vegetables, and you're, maybe cutting these things and then making a salad or something like that. And then as the child develops and goes on to the later pretend play stage, the child can use invisible toys. Maybe I'm just pretending to eat something, right? And that's later pretend play because in my head I'm actually thinking or symbolizing that okay, I'm doing something and I don't need the real life objects to for me to play with. Then as kids grow out of pretend play, then comes the aspect of role play. Now, role play is again where you're trying to take different roles, where kids typically learn to decide who gets to do what, who is which character, and what happens next, and what is the sequence, and build a situation, okay, and then play around that idea. So you'll see what we spoke in the developmental ladder. Creating ideas is something which starts growing from the pretend play and the role play stage. All right, so that's about role play, and then we have playing board games. Playing board games are again fun because you are really interacting with kids. Kids learn the concept of winning and losing. Okay, kids will learn to observe each other and predict the next move in their heads. That okay, she's done something. Now this is what I am going to do, so that the other person does something else. All right. So we need to again think of why playing board games or playing board games with rules could be a little difficult when we play people games with rules. Okay, what happens is the child is learning to attend to you, to be with you. The child learns to wait, the child learns to take turns. But when there is an external distractor in terms of something on a board or pieces right in front of him, it gets difficult for the child to shift attention, right? So that's why maybe playing board games could be a challenge for kids who are on the spectrum. Okay, so now that we have spoken about what kind of toys you can use with your kids and what are the different stages of toy play, and we've learned about how to get them engaged with their first playmates, which is you. So now you know that okay, this is how I have to play to get the child, to really. So sorry, for me to join the child's world. I'm saying the other way around. Yeah. So you are the first playmate, but that's not it. You want to really expand it to other situations, right? So expand that play to other situations, or the child needs to be able to play with his peers, other kids, other people, right? So we're going to talk about how to help your child improve their interaction with other children, right? So before we could do that, let's take a moment and think about how your child plays with other kids, right? So maybe the child really enjoys playing with other children. Is able to share, borrow toys, or maybe the child just likes to play alone. There are a couple of kids who like to be in the presence of other kids, but they might not really interact, or they might not want to be a part of that group. Okay, so it can be anything. So you really need to be mindful and think about what your child does. Another thing which we commonly experience is whenever we meet new people or new friends, or we take our kids to the park, and we have parents constantly saying things like, "Go, go, go, go! You play with that friend or play with that person, and look what she's doing. Come, you do it too. You also, go and get on the seesaw." Uh, what happens is maybe the child is holding on to himself because he is anxious. He's not telling you why he's anxious. So you really need to be mindful about what is what is that's stopping him from doing that. Okay, what we end up doing is disrespecting them when we try to be very pushy, or we're just trying to be like, hey, it's just the seesaw, it's okay, you can do this. Oh, we're just being together, just do it, right? So what seems as just normal for us might not really be for the child. It is really, really, really challenging. So we really need to acknowledge how the child feels at that moment. And that is why we're going to discuss about peer play, right? So just as we had different stages of toy play, we have different stages of pure play. So you might see the child enjoys playing alone. Okay, the child is first unaware of anybody around him, and he's so self-absorbed in maybe watching the wheels of the car spin, or doing something which cuts him off the rest of the world. Now, later on, as the child develops, he might not go near kids, but he's still aware of the presence of other children around, right? So once that grows out, the child moves on to a stage called parallel play, which is playing side by side, right? So at first, kids who are playing side by side might not even notice what the other child is doing or what is it that they're playing with. But later on, they might maybe start using the same set of pieces, but have, doing their own individual plays. So that's where they're starting to observe what the other person is trying to do, but not really be a part of their game. Once that develops, then we have something called starting to interact. When kids start to interact, how do we know that? We know that when they are building Legos together, okay, when they are sharing, when they are borrowing, when they are lending pieces to each other. So that's where they are starting to interact. Now we need to really, understand that the play is still not coordinated. Okay, now you might just see the play happening in bits and pieces, which is still okay. You have to acknowledge that, okay, my child was not able to bear the presence of another child few days back, but now at least he's being tolerant. Okay, at least he's trying to go to that person and pick out one piece and come back. So it's okay if the child is doing it. Try not to be pushy. Okay, and once you've done all these things and really helped your child by being there, really being there and supporting your kid, the child will eventually learn to play cooperatively. And once kids learn to play cooperatively, the possibilities are just limitless. They can do just anything while playing. Okay, so we've spoken about these stages of pure play overflow. Now, what we want to do next is we would want to choose the right playmate for our kids, because uh, kids need to interact. Kids need other children to be with. But many times, what happens is parents might feel that, okay, maybe the other child is not a suitable partner for my kid. So it's all about choosing the right playmate for your child. It's about setting up what you need uh, to make new friends. You need the right partners. You need the right kind of toys. You need to see that, okay, the kids who are playing together at least have some sort of similar interests in play. And you also need to rehearse what you're trying to do, rehearse what you're trying to teach to your child. This is something which is a huge topic and aspect that we covered in our parent training programs. I conduct the Hanen More Than Words program for parents, so that's where it gets covered, right? So yeah. So we've spoken about how to be with our kids. We've spoken about building up that engagement, that bond with our kids. Uh, I just want to tell you guys that it is very important that the child learns to trust you, because trust is the basis of any sort of relationship for that matter. It's irrespective of, the child does not understand anything, or the child is too low on his levels to understand what's happening. That's not it. The child really understands or really feels what you're trying to convey. Uh, I have one of the examples that I would like to share with you. Now, I had this little kiddo with ASD who met me a few years back. He was 3 years old back then. And we tried to get him to play, and he reacted in a very abusive manner. He threw a major tantrum, and the total the session went for a toss. The parents were really disappointed. I was really disappointed that, hey, what happened there? Like, did I do anything? Did I not know anything about the child? Because we tried to collect all possible information about the kid before we could start working with the child or playing with the child. And then the parents told me that the child has a very negative memory, and the negative memory was of his previous place where he used to go to, and he was forcefully, made to sit on a chair, tied up, and use flashcards to learn to communicate. Now that built in such a strong negative memory in the child that he lost trust on every other person except for his parents. Okay, so as an SLP, my job was not to work on his comprehension skills and expressive skills and oromotor skills. It was something which was much more basic than all of this. It was to build connection, to build trust. Okay, so you might have to spend couple of sessions in just building that relationship with your child, and the moment the child builds that trust with you, you can just do anything and the magic happens, because that's when the child wants to be with you. That's when the child is looking forward to go to therapies, and that's when the child is ready to give in his best. So we started off with playing activities, these games which incorporated his sensory profile. So i'm I'm sure there are lots of SLPs watching this webinar. I only want to tell you guys that please try to work with an occupational therapist, because they are the best people who can help you in terms of understanding individual profiles of children, and based on which you will be able to pick out the right kind of toys for your kids, right? So always try to work in coordination with OTs, because they do a fantabulous job. So we really need to go hand in hand, and yeah, so that's where I wanted to highlight the importance of just being with the child, because once you establish that kind of connection, and then you just get things going. So I would like to just conclude this session saying all the best. Have fun working with your kids. Actually, no, have fun playing with your kids, because it is not work. Because the moment it becomes about pleasing you, then pleasing is not work. Pleasing is not play, it is all work. It is work for connection. So yes, all the best. And now we are open for questions. Okay, so first question is, what is DIR exactly? Do we have online courses? Yes. DIR, for DIR, you can please log on to icdl.com, and it's a different way of working with the child. It's a very play based and family centered approach, where we don't just look at the child who needs intervention, but we try to incorporate family as well. So we're looking at the parents, the grandparents, the caregivers, and we try to coach them and teach them in terms of what is the best way they can support their kids. Then we have a question by Poojan Shah, who says, my child is 3.5 years old. He is autistic. He does not have speech, but does a lot of mumming but can't speak. Could help us to guide us in creative manner. Okay. So if he is not speaking and he's just humming all the time, you might want to think of why he is doing it. He's maybe doing it because he loves that feedback. And yes, you definitely need a speech therapist to work on these skills. Okay, so I'd suggest go to a speech therapist, go to an occupational therapist, go to a psychologist, please. Uh, what is the DIR model? We've already spoken about that. How to motivate child to play with other kids? Yes, how to motivate child to play with other kids. So you need to really take into account kids have similar interests. It is only then that the child will want to go and join in with other children. Okay. All right. I want to keep playing with my child, but whenever I try to engage with him, he does not like to get engaged. When I try harder to get engaged with him, he starts crying or being unhappy. We just had the entire session on why that is happening. Okay, it seems that my audio is not well. he does not allow us to touch him. If he does not allow you to touch him, it is because he has sensory processing challenges. Please meet an occupational therapist. Tell what strategy can we use for head banging. My son head bangs when he gets upset and he can't communicate his need. He's 4 years and non-verbal. You need to understand what is causing that behavior. You've already told me that he cannot communicate. So the fact that he is not able to communicate gets him more frustrated. Think of how you can ease that communication. So you could try to use visual support system in terms of pictures of things that he regularly uses. Okay, and that will try to get that predictability, that will try to give him a way of communicating with you, and definitely see a speech therapist. Escaping during activity is a coping strategy. Escaping during activity is because he just does not want to be a part of that game, because you are trying to challenge him in some way or the other. So you really need to bring down your demands. Try not to demand too much from your kid and just be. I find difficult getting child's attention, though I give her and do favorite things. That cannot be. You might have to think of doing something more. Maybe just try to use a lot of sensory interest. Maybe it's a nice idea if you seek help from an occupational therapist to really understand what your child's individual need is, so that you can sit together and probably categorize what toys you can use for your child. And for any sort of interaction to get going, please uh, try to follow the child's lead, because the moment you're following the child's lead, the moment you let them be the boss, uh, he can take charge and do a lot more better. And eventually, he will look forward to having you in their world. When you talked about people play, me and my wife to do be playing together with child like tickling, and he does not respond. But when we try to divert him and engage, he runs away. Do not engage. A lot of time we have done this, but he never gets engaged. Could suggest some idea on it, and how we can try some other method. Maybe the example that I have given might not really be the thing that you might want to do. Think of what excites your kid the most. So don't look at tickles. Maybe he does not really register what a tickle is. He does not feel it. Maybe you might want to really observe what gets the child's attention. Is it by using a lot of visual stuff? Is it by using a lot of songs or sounds? Okay, and and try not to demand, as I said, not to demand too much from the child, because I see when you say he's not engaging with me, it means that it's suggesting that you're really trying to wait for a response and try what he's doing and then giving in too easily. So you might want to think of more activities that you could use. And I have a link where I can access later. Uh, yes, you can please visit icdl.com or the www.hanen.org to know more about the Hanen programs and also about the DIR Floortime model. Um, my child's 2.7-year-old points to things he needs but does communicate verbally. Okay, so if your child is only communicating for needs, you might really want to make things fun for your child, uh, so that he learns to expand his communication beyond just expressing needs. It will give him a scope to maybe share interests or tell you, hey, look what I did. Okay, so react to your kids with a lot of excitement, a lot of animation, a lot of affect in your voice, which is really going to let him have you in your world, and that's again going to be beyond his needs. Right, too many questions. Here we have, my child is 16 years He likes to be with people, but very challenging to engage with conversation. He does lot of self-talking, negative phrase, please advise. Yes, this is something which is very important and which you would want to know about is when he is doing a lot of self-talking, he is using a lot of echolalia. Uh, if it is negative, you need to understand where it is coming from. You need to understand what is causing that kind of negative self-talking. It is probably something which he has experienced in the past. So what you might want to think about is what are the situations where your child engages in a lot of negative self-talking, right? Um, for him to get engaged in conversation, first you have to really make him comfortable. So once he feels that everybody around him is supporting him, you will see that the negative self-talking is. My kid is 4 year old. He can say rhymes and not many words, but is not repeating. If I ask him to repeat most of the time. Okay, your child is 4 years old. All right. So, like I said, using a lot of rhymes and words and numbers, shapes, it's something which is a consequence of screen time. It is again tapping their rote memory, something which they have memorized. Okay, so that's when we talk of rote memory, they're not using it yet for a meaningful purpose. All right, so if he has many words and he is not repeating most of the time, you might want to think of why is he not doing it. Okay, so is it because he is self-absorbed in doing something else? If he is repeating, sorry, if okay, if you are asking him to repeat and if he's not doing it, you might want to think of similar things in terms of motor imitation. Does he have problems even in terms of motor planning and sequencing or imitating motor movements? Why don't you try doing a simple rhyme like head, shoulders, knees, and toes and get him to repeat your movements there? And slowly, while you make it fun, you just try to observe if the child is trying to give in to that interaction. Now, this is going to take a lot of time, and it takes a lot of training. Parents, please do not give up so easily. It takes quite a while for us to have that connection with the child where we say something and the child repeats by himself. So one thing which is very commonly seen in kids with autism is something called apraxia. So for which you will definitely have to meet a speech therapist and find out if that is a factor which is contributing to him not being able to repeat. Okay, so how to cater to ASD with play therapy when they are in a group. So when they are in a group, you need to understand how you want to coach your kids. Okay, you need to understand when exactly to help or support them from having a breakdown, and when you have to withdraw yourself so that the kids are able to play independently. Like I said, please incorporate your child's sensory interests. So even if he's in a group, you set up a group wherein the kids have similar sorts of interests and they are able to then connect with each other. Is DIR evidence based for managing ASD? Yes, it is very evidence based for managing ASD. It is a different way of thinking, and that is why probably you have raised that question. I'd suggest please visit their website if you want to know about what the model is. What is the basic difference between sensory integration and play therapy? Please seek help from an occupational therapist because that is not my area to comment about. Okay, in autism, there is a coping strategy among children wherein they might harm themselves or bite oneself in such condition. How can we let them continue with this coping strategy? Okay, biting is something which again is unsafe, not very acceptable. Uh, you might want to look at biting as a behavior and something that's causing it. Okay, so biting is a reaction to something which is happening around the child. So you really need to uh, get into the detail of what is happening to the child. Was there any sort of anxiety caused? Was there any sort of unpredictable routine that happened in the day, or something which was unexpected that happened? Maybe the child wanted to play with something or do something and he was not allowed to do it, which led him to dysregulate in this kind of manner. Okay, so no, I do not encourage things that are unsafe. It is always mindful and wise to think about what is causing that to happen. My child understands but is having difficulty in speaking. How do I help him? Please, uh, please seek help from a speech language therapist for this, because you need to know what level of comprehension or what level of expression your child is at, and then how you can build upon relating and engagement with your kids to get the thing going. All right. So sitting tolerance and play therapy. Please use activities or sensory-based activities which incorporate sitting, and maybe like you can use maybe shaving foam to play with, or use activities which incorporate the child in staying in one place and doing something fun. Okay, don't give them tasks. Use these activities based on their sensory interests. Get them to focus on what is the kind of task, or what is the kind of activity that they're supposed to do. I think if you incorporate their individual differences, you will be able to see a change in them, and for sure an occupational therapist will be a better person to give you an insight. My child flaps a lot with his hands and on the wall and door. How to reduce it? Because he is 9 years old, sir, I would want you to think of when he does it, what leads to that kind of hand flapping. And again, if it is hand flapping, and if it is not unsafe, maybe he is just trying to regulate himself. Uh, so you might want to think of what kind of situation this kind of dysregulation occurs, and he starts to flap his hands, or maybe run around or seek lot of stimulation. Like I said, please seek help from an occupational therapist. There's a case of sexual abuse. I am so sorry, I'm not in a position to comment on that because that's not our area. Um, my child is 4 years old now, knows a lot of single words but cannot talk in sentences. She blabbers a lot. How to make her converse in beautiful sentences? Ma'am, she is only using single words right now. I think you might want to spend a little more time using words and slowly developing into maybe 2 to 3 words or a phrase level. It's going to take quite a while till you get on to a conversation or a sentence level. Please do feel free to talk to a speech therapist. How to build eye contact with an autistic child? All right. So, hmm, when you are trying to really engage with your child in one of his fun activities, when you let the child take the lead of what he wants to do, when the child wants you to be a part of his world, he is definitely going to make eye contact. I would really not suggest holding on to their heads and faces and be like, look at me. No, that does not work. You're only going to make that worse. Okay. If a child is hypersensitive to light, whenever light gets on, the child gets irritated and builds self-injurious behavior. So what to do in that case? Ma'am, please visit an occupational therapist, because sensory integration is something which is dealt by them. My knowledge of sensory integration is solely based on what I have learned in my trainings, and that's what I've tried to deliver to you guys. The child does not follow rules of the game properly. If the child is not able to follow rules of the game properly, you might want to again go back to his unique biologies. You might want to think about his ability to process instructions, um, understand and make sense of what he has, what you are telling him. Maybe if the rules are a lot for a child, it's going to be difficult for him to keep up pace with you and really understand what's to be done. My son is high functional. He is 5 now. We have been in therapy for more than 2 years and seeing huge progress. We still see the child ignores questions that are mundane, like did you have breakfast, or did something similar where or something similar, whereas he immediately turns around and communicates if we talk about something he's interested in, what is 2 plus 2 in the very same moment or situation. All right, so it has something to do with incorporating the child's interest over here. The child is definitely not interested to answer a question like, did you have breakfast? Well, what do I get if I answer or don't answer to that question? So if I'm not interested, as a child, I might not even want to pay attention. Whereas if you ask me what is 2 and 2 plus 2, and if I really like numbers, I will really try to attend to that information. So maybe what you could do is, why don't you try incorporating his interest into what you're trying to build that idea around. Like, okay, so again, just to tell you that asking questions which are closed ended, like, did you have breakfast? uh, it's either a yes or a no. Okay, maybe it's not interesting for the child. Okay, so maybe what you could do is start off with talking about something he loves to eat. So maybe you say, hey, did we have cupcakes for breakfast? Let's think about this. And then if the child really likes cupcakes, he's definitely going to listen to you. And maybe if not answer, at least attend to what you're trying to talk about. Okay, so I think one way you can get your child to attend to you is by incorporating the child's interest and slowly diverging him from his interest to making something which is a little more challenging. Uh, if a child with ASD just likes to play with bubbles, does not want to play with other toy, even if bubbles is used as reinforcement, child wants it continuously thereafter. What should be done to make child like other toys? What strategies can be used during speech therapy? Okay. All right. So I think you might want to maybe make a list of what kind of things your child is interested in, what kind of toys your child is interested in. So again, the insight to your child's unique profile will be given by an occupational therapist. So he or she will be the best person to help you understand what your child's respective preferences are, and based on that, definitely the child will be able to probably cooperate, and you can see some kind of engagement happening. Um, what you could do is, if the child is continuously using bubbles, uh, maybe you might want to visually show him uh, that, okay, now we're going to do a set of 5 activities, maybe have 5 pictures in a sequence. So the moment the child knows what's coming next, or maybe you could actually use bubbles as the last picture, which will actually keep him motivated, thinking that, okay, we play with 4 toys and the last one is bubbles, and yay, we're done. Okay, and then maybe have a picture of, say, saying bye bye. So the child knows that, okay, after bubbles are done, we say bye bye, so bubble time is over. All right. What strategies can be used during speech therapy? Okay, what you could do while playing is try to use words based on what level your child is at. If you think your child is uh, only able to understand single words, maybe just spend a little more time doing that and slowly expanding that into maybe name the object and maybe name the action, or use a lot of exclamatory remarks, and try to increase on the number of words that the child uses as the child uh, gets comfortable and the child is used to your way of play. So I'm not saying that when you build in predictability, you try to do the same thing again and again and again and just let him enjoy. Obviously, yes, you need to challenge the child, but you need to really try and see how much to challenge the child. So it's a very trial and error thing. Some children might accept that kind of challenge, or if you just wait and see if the child does something else, or if the child reacts in a negative manner, it might also mean that the child is not ready yet. So maybe spend a little more while engaging with the kid. Can you give examples of proprioception, underreactive, and overreactive? Please, if there are any questions related to sensory integration, please seek help from an occupational therapist. Kindly guide us how to use the play therapy during lockdown period with limited resources with parents. Yes, please get in touch with me. Maybe we can have a talk and I can get to know what all are the resources that are available to you, and we could think of what could be the possible play ideas we could come up with while we are working with our DIR model. I work with a child who likes to only engage with his soft toy elephant and the phone. He has ASD and ADHD. How can I help in this case to reduce hyperactivity and listen to commands? Okay, I might want to know more about this child. Maybe if you can elaborate a bit more later on, it will help me, and then I can give you my comments on it. Coping strategies like running around or making different sounds sometimes may create disturbance in classrooms. What classroom interventions would you suggest? Ma'am, I would really suggest some sort of special schedule that you could frame for the child. I think he's running around and making different sounds could possibly be because at some point of time the child is getting anxious and dysregulated. It could also be a very high sensory need that he needs to do at that point of time to keep himself calm. So maybe in his schedule, if you could possibly incorporate some sort of sensory breaks where you maybe allow him to go take a stroll around the school, or have a specified corner for a child with ASD where you let him do things that his system needs, will probably bring down that disturbance that he is causing. So please try to understand that if he is causing a disturbance, is not because he wants to do it and he's a troublemaker. It's because his system wants to do something to make him calm. To know more about it, please visit an occupation. My kid also likes to listen to movie songs, but is screen time okay? Screen time too long, definitely not okay. If you could think of how you can use the screen time, or maybe looking at watching songs or the rhymes in terms of doing that activity together, maybe that might be a better idea for you to engage with him. How to help a 5-year-old ASD child with obsession for animals and continuous verbal stimming for only animals, though he has a good vocabulary but avoids using it. Okay, so he has very strong interests, which is animals. So he loves to play with animals. I think if it is a strong interest and he is continuously stimming on it, it's it's okay, but you might want to also think of how to expand on his ideas. Okay, probably he's just speaking repeatedly about animals is because probably that's his comfort zone. He probably finds everything else a little too challenging for himself, and he doesn't know what is expected out of him. Maybe if you could incorporate situations where or a play where animals are playing some role and get some kind of engagement going on, does that help? Any inputs on activities or strategies for 3 cases? Very poor eye contact, uh, and self-vocalization, echolalia and imitation of gestures, continuous singing or humming rhymes. Again, I think you might want to really get back to looking at what your child likes to do the best and really try to engage with him without any expectations. I think the poor eye contact is again probably an outcome of something which is challenging to the child. A lot of self-vocalization could be happening because the child wants to keep himself calm. Echolalia, again, the child is trying to keep himself calm, and also it means that the child is trying to communicate through echolalia. So don't take echolalia as meaningless. The child, there are often times where children tend to use certain set of learned dialogues or utterances for a given situation. So if a child is upset or scared, the child might use a dialogue or something which he's learned in person. I have a very good example for that. So I used to see this child with autism who was 7 years old and who had an obsession with the Lion King movie. Now, in that movie, there is a scene where Mufasa dies and Simba's crying, and then the bad guy Scar comes and he tells Simba, "Go away and never return." So we were having this session with a child where the child got really, really worked up, and he wanted me to stop what probably I was trying to work with. And he said this dialogue, "Go away and never return." This is again probably telling me that, okay, I think I need to take a step back because maybe I'm challenging the child a bit too much. So echolalias are never, never, never meaningless. They always have a meaning. You will need to pay close attention to it and definitely visit a speech language pathologist to help you out. What to do? Child who has a repetitive play pattern, even though I have modeled how to play with a toy properly, he continuously repeats unnecessary plays such as lining up toys, stacking up toys, spinning wheels. um, these are typically examples of exploratory play when he's trying to line up toys, he's watching the wheels spin. And what you want him to do is probably move on to a functional play or a pretend play. Uh, Try not to force the child, or try not to force the child to look at what I am doing and then do the same, because that's not how it works. Maybe you have to take, follow the child's lead. Maybe you have to sit down with the child and do what the child is doing. Build up that reciprocal interaction, that connection, that bond, and make the child feel safe in terms of, okay, I trust this person. So let's try and give it a shot and do something else. Okay, so these are examples of exploratory play, and you might want to really think of whether it is mindful if you want to expect him to do a lot of imitation when you're trying to model. Thank you for your motivational assistance. You're welcome. Yes. Glad to be a part. Uh, can you share how your play therapy looks like? To be very specific, how you plan your session? Yes, we can definitely talk about this. Should a child with ASD be enrolled in a special school? Now, it depends on whether the school is inclusive or not, or whether the school has that kind of support system to assist a child with ASD. So yes, it would be a good idea to enroll him in a special school, at least to give him the basic foundation skills that a child needs or requires. Because if I'm not sure what is the kind of functioning level of this kid, but if the child finds it really difficult to keep up with typically developing kids, it's going to be really challenging, the people around, the environment, and what is going to happen eventually is the child might just end up shutting himself. So it is, please go and find out if there is any sort of support given in that school, because yes, these days mostly schools have support in terms of special educators and shadow teachers who really do a wonderful job. And there are again a couple of schools who have speech therapists and occupational therapists working with them. So yes, please find out if schools have that kind of facility. Please answer my question. I'm so sorry. We are taking speech therapy since 5 months, but my child is not calling mama, papa by relationship. Um, Surekha, yes. So I think you might want to um, really get your child comfortable, build up that relationship with your child first. I'm sure you guys are parents and you guys are doing a very wonderful job, but expecting the child to call mama and papa, and when you say that he is not able to relate, is suggesting that maybe you might want to spend some more time making him more comfortable, uh, spend some more time building up that trust in your relationship, wherein he feels so safe and he learns to acknowledge you guys as parents rather than just people who are there to support him. And I think, yes, to add on to that, once you have established that kind of relationships, you can also use pictures of yourself, and maybe play peekaboo, maybe play hide and seek, and or you play these kind of people games with kids, wherein you reward them with something that they love. So, for example, when I'm playing hide and seek with my child, and then he seeks me, so I go and give him a nice tight hug and maybe say things like, "Oh, mama's gonna hug you tight," or that kind of fun stuff, which helps helps your child relate to you. Um, so I think spend more time doing a lot of people games where he learns to look at you guys as his comfort zones first, and then maybe when you want to expand it, you can use a lot of play with pictures and try to see if the child really understands. How can we reach you for therapy for my child? Please, please, please contact me. I have given my email address. We have our website up here, and I'll be glad to help you. One of client touches wall while walking. He sticks to wall and walks. If he sticks to the wall and walks, probably it's something to do with what feedback he is getting. Please go to an occupational therapist. He or she will be a better person to talk to you about that. It could also be because he's trying to get some sort of proprioceptive feedback also, if he likes that kind of proximity with the wall. But definitely, please talk to an OT for this. How do we control their self-talk during a task? You might want to think of why the self-talk is happening. You might want to think of what is the content that the child is trying to express or communicate to you, because many kids tend to have a lot of when self-talk when they are very anxious. Please suggest activities to stimulate language and pre-linguistics for a child with unilateral, mild to moderate conductive hearing loss and attention deficit disorder and delayed speech and language. This is by Himani Bansal. Himani, I think if we already know that audition is something which is compromised in your little one's case, maybe you look at other sensory systems and think of what activities you can use to really get your child to engage with you. So you could use a lot of visual stimulation if your child has ADHD, loves to move around. Maybe use that moving around into a meaningful activity, where maybe with you, get him to maybe run across the room and crash on a beanbag or something like that. These are just a few examples. Very informative. Great job. Thank you. My client loves music. Currently, I'm using in form of nursery rhymes, just altering words to include words to be used. We want to use music to help him understand his daily life and about different objects through music. We are currently dependent on reception. What are the best extra clinical activities? Most importantly, how can we start working on his expressive skills? What you could do is, I like the fact that you are trying to incorporate music, which seems to be a high interest of your client. What you could try to do to get this client to express is try to build up on gestural communication. If he's a child who's nonverbal, try to build up on gestural expressions. I would certainly be interested to know more about this kid. Is he verbal? How many words does he speak? And if I have that information, I'll be really be able to help out on what is to be done next. My son is 3.5 years now and undergoing speech therapy since 2.6 years of age. Yet he is not speaking. He does not want to speak and cries when we try to engage him in any speech related activities. He expresses his needs by taking himself or by taking hand support of others or parents. What I think that could be a reason, because what you're trying to do is challenging right now. It might be the fact that the goals that are presently being taken might genuinely be really challenging for the child. And since he is not being able to keep up with what's being taught to him, he is continuously maybe crying and he is avoiding to speak. So you might want to think of how you can simplify these activities. And yes, if he's expressing his needs only by using gestures, maybe try to use a lot of people games and see if you establish that kind of fun and joy kind of a relationship, and then slowly you start to bring in words in that scenario. um yeah, so I'd like to know more about your child so that I'll be able to help you out in a better manner. I'm not able to find out my client's interest. The parents are not willing to fully admit about their child being autism. Okay. uh, and wish he will be normal again. They are not clear about what the child likes. How can I elicit some interest to shape the therapy? How can I counsel the parents to understand autism and normalcy? Okay, clearly, I feel that the family dynamics is something which needs to be worked on. If the family is not supportive enough, the family is not accepting that the child needs help, then I'm not sure what kind of confidence are they showing in us as professionals. Okay, why don't you do one thing? Maybe try to pick out couple of simple activities based on every sensory aspect. Get in touch with an OT to get to know more about that, and maybe just let the child be. Maybe just leave him and see what is it that interests the child. Okay. So when you are actually observing what the child does in a given when he is given a particular toy, when he picks out something from the shelf, that will give you an insight about what is it that he likes to do. For example, I had this one little girl I used to see, and she liked these stacking rings, and she did not like to stack it up. She liked to spin it. So whenever you see a toy, don't look at toy as a toy, but you need to get into the depth of it. You need to understand what is it that the child is doing while playing with that toy, because what the child does is going to give you some information about the child's preference. And speaking about parents, I definitely would recommend counseling. So please approach the right professionals, and to get the professional to support the parents. If acceptance is an issue, there are high chances that unfortunately the therapy is going to get compromised, because the most important thing that we need in our therapies as professionals is support from parents, and parents are the best therapists for their kids. Multilingual environments. It is usually said that children exposed to multilingual environments at an early age have creative brain development, etc. How does this relate to children with ESD? Ma'am, I think you might want to tell me more about your child. And certainly, as speech therapists, when we know that a child has a concern with, in terms of delay in speech and language, we generally recommend that maybe one language is used. And even when you're using one language, we need to ensure that you're using limited number of words to start with, and make sure that the child is making sense out of what you're trying to tell. It doesn't mean you just go on talking and talking. Yes, but it is highly recommended that you make your child confident and get him to pick up one language. But I'll certainly be interested to do more. All right. So, okay. Um, I asked because my son prefers English than his mother tongue. I think it's something to talk about cultural difference. All of us, we've come from a different cultural background, a different linguistic background, and yes, English is something which we require because that's a high demand even from school. Um, but yes, if your child is diagnosed with ASD and if you know that the child has difficulty expressing himself, I would recommend that you stick to English as a language and give him one language to express himself first. And later on, you can think of what to do next. Can we introduce karate to child with ASD? I'm so sorry, Kushbu, I'm not in a position to answer to that question. Hmm, what can be done if a child's interest only shifts from one moving object to another, from train to bus or vipers, but doesn't seem to change beyond that? See, if he is using a lot of is seeing a lot of moving trains or vipers, that's giving you an information that he wants to watch things move. Maybe what you can do is expand within that idea first, and then you can try to introduce more elements. Maybe I think we are again getting onto the sensory integration part of it, which is best answered by an occupation. Can we have this recorded? I missed the beginning. Can you please get in touch with the organizers? They'll certainly be in a position to help you out. Any medicines effective in speech, Ayurvedic or homeopathy? I'm so sorry, I'm not in a position to answer to that question, but I certainly know that a lot of regular exposure, a lot of practice certainly makes a lot of change. Are headphones useful in speech therapy? Uh, you might want to tell me more about your child. Yes, headphones are definitely, I've seen occupational therapists use headphones for different types of, one of the programs that I have come across is the therapeutic listening program, wherein they use a lot of calming music to get the kids to focus better. Headphones, again, if the child is oversensitive to sounds, then there are noise dampening headphones, like I mentioned in the presentation, that are given to kids to filter out that auditory information and keep them focused. But again, since we are talking of sensory integration here, you might want to check it out with an occupational therapist. Do you have recommendations for parental counseling to cope up with stress around parenting special kids? Definitely, yes. Please meet a counselor who can help out parents of special kids, because I know for a fact that it's a very difficult, challenging job to try to handle a child with special needs. So definitely, as much as kids need support, kids need training, parents need a lot of support so that parents can help their kids in a better manner. So yes, definitely seek help. And again, counseling is something which is done by psychologists, and we've had some beautiful people do a lot of give us insight about different things. So please approach the right people. They'll be able to help you out. Can autism be diagnosed before 3 years of age? I know symptoms can start after 1 year only, but also heard that below 3 years, no child is labeled as autistic. Uh, I think you can get the child diagnosed around 1.5 years of age, and generally what they do is they diagnose as at risk at high risk of autism. They don't call it diagnose it as autism, but they say that okay, your child might be at high risk of developing autism later on. Are there any significant differences in symptoms between a girl and a boy developing early red flag signs of autism. Himani, that's a very good question, but I don't think I would personally want to look at kids as gender specific. I think I've always been looking as a child, and I've tried my best to help them out. So I'm not sure how I can answer that question to you. For non-verbal communication, what are all different ways you suggest to use children with ASD? I don't think I got that question right. For non-verbal communication, what you could do is you could use a lot of gestural communication, a lot of acting out and talking to the child. You could use pictures. Pictures help in terms of building a system of communication, which we call the AAC, Augmentative Alternative Communication System. So yes, we do that when we are working with non-verbal kids. Tongue tie is one of the reasons for speech delay. It could be one of the reasons of speech delay, yes, because when your tongue does not have enough space to move inside your mouth and it is just tied, you are going to have a lot of trouble speaking. So, and it's not a big procedure. They do a tongue tie release. So, if you think your child has tongue tie, you can definitely go visit the professionals and then they'll get it sorted for you. Is it as advisable to start OT and speech therapy or speech therapy after a few months of OT? If yes, how many months? And how does OT boost up child's performance in speech therapy? I love this question. This is a really good question. So, yes, it is advisable to start OT and speech therapy together. The reason being, the OTs are constantly doing a wonderful job working with the sensory integration, working with movement related aspects and exercises. And when they are doing that, the kids are getting much more calmer. So, for example, if I have a child who just loves to run around all the time, and just doesn't want to stay at one place and engage in any sort of activity. It is going to be very difficult for me to do speech therapy with him alone. But when the child has a support from an occupational therapist and they are working on the entire sensory dysregulation aspect, the child is definitely going to be much more calmer during the speech therapy sessions. So yes, it is definitely advisable to take speech and OT together. And I think probably because many people say that you have to first take OT and then you have to take speech is because they want to ensure that you know OT works for the kids first. And what I've heard people say is the child needs to sit at one place to do speech therapy, and no, that is not so. I can do speech therapy even after I'm running, while I'm running after the child. So, yeah, I think you do it together. That should be fine. Will musical pegboards help in speech therapy? I would want you to think of what more creative ideas could you incorporate while using a musical pegboard. Yeah, if you're trying to engage in some sort of reciprocal interaction, definitely it will help to get your child to engage in therapy. I've been trying very long to help my son use proverbs you and I correctly. Can you give me ideas on how to approach it? Ma'am, this is a very common thing that I have seen in my work experience, the confusion between you and I, for example, and especially when these kids have echolalia, the habit of repeating what you say. If I ask a child who has echolalia, do you want some water? The child asks me back, do you want some water? And then I'm like, no, you say I want some water. So then child says, I want some water. So you are actually making the confusion even more worse. So what you could do in such case is always try to speak from the child's perspective. Like for example, I speak like the child, or I model what I want the child to speak. So instead of asking, "Do you want some water?" I might just say, "Mama, I'm thirsty and I want some water," yeah, whatever that I want to add on. So, and the child repeats that. Maybe what you could do is exaggerate that talking, and use a lot of gestures and do like I and me, so that the child develops that sense of self. I think that should be able to help you. Okay, so yeah, so I think we are out of time now. I would love to have many more questions, so please get in touch with me on my email address, and I'll definitely be able to help you out. Thank you so much. You guys have really been patient listeners. Thank you. Bye bye.